The BRVM has just crossed a historic milestone. For the first time since its creation, its main index has moved above 500 points, and that was not the only record set this week. Hello and welcome to Markets Talk, your weekly market update from Daba Finance. Today, we are looking back at an exceptionally strong week on the BRVM. The stocks that led the rally, activity in the bond market, dividends investors should be watching, and some of the biggest economic and investment stories from across Africa. Let's start with the good news. The BRVM Composite rose by 6.33% to end the week at 529.15 points. That is a new all-time high. The BRVM 30 performed even better, gaining 7.63% to 255.75 points. The BRVM Prestige climbed 7.82% to 196.68 points, while the BRVM Principal advanced 1.70% to 382.84 points. And there was a second major record. The total value of shares listed on the BRVM crossed 20 trillion CFA francs for the first time. Equity market capitalization now stands at approximately 20.405 trillion CFA francs. Why does that matter for investors? Because a rising market capitalization means the combined value of listed companies is increasing. Over time, a larger market can attract more institutional capital from pension funds, asset managers, and international investors. The total value of transactions also jumped by 36.20%, reaching about 15.29 billion CFA francs. But there is an interesting detail. The actual number of shares traded fell by 8.26%. In other words, fewer shares changed hands, but at a much higher total value. That suggests trading activity was increasingly concentrated in higher value stocks and some of the market's largest companies. Sonatel was the most actively traded stock, with more than 2.13 billion CFA francs in transactions. BEIC Benin and Société Générale Côte d'Ivoire were also among the most heavily traded names. And importantly, the rally was broad. 30 stocks gained during the week, compared with 17 that declined. Now let's look at the top stocks of the week. CIA Côte d'Ivoire led the market with a 25.11% gain. The stock ended at 6,900 CFA francs after reaching 7,090 CFA francs during the week. That move was part of a remarkable week for utilities, which gained almost 20% as a sector. Uniwax came in second. The stock climbed 23.25% to close at 2,465 CFA francs. SAPH completed the top three with a 17.93% gain to 9,440 CFA francs. And there is another factor to watch with SAPH. A dividend of 489 CFA francs per share is due to go ex-dividend this week. Telecommunication stocks were also among the strongest performers. Orange Côte d'Ivoire rose by more than 16%, while Sonatel gained almost 16%. Both stocks reached record prices during the week. What stands out here is that this was not a rally driven by just one company. Utilities, telecommunications, energy, and several industrial names all participated. A rally spread across several sectors is generally more encouraging than one driven by only one or two stocks. Investors should still remain disciplined. Sycor fell by 14 to 19% after gaining more than 42% the previous week. That looks largely like profit-taking. It is an important reminder. Even in a rising market, a stock that climbs very quickly can experience a sharp pullback when investors decide to lock in gains. The bond market was much quieter. Bond market capitalization declined by 0.49% to approximately 12.845 trillion CFA francs. A total of 30,019 bonds were traded during the week, worth about 289 million CFA francs. Most of that activity was concentrated in the 5-year TPCI bond carrying a 5.90% coupon. Almost 1,400 bonds changed hands for approximately 145 million CFA francs. That means a single bond accounted for roughly half of the entire value traded on the bond market during the week. For investors, bonds can remain useful when building a portfolio designed to combine equity growth with more predictable income and generally lower volatility. Looking at opportunities for the coming week, some bonds continue to offer attractive yields to maturity. A 10-year CRH UMO bond, carrying a 5.85% coupon, for example, showed an indicated yield to maturity above 11% at the price included in the report. Sovereign bonds from Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire also provide investors with different combinations of maturity, coupon income, and yield. Now, a quick update on dividends. The 2026 BRVM dividend season continues to generate income for shareholders. 35 out of 47 listed companies are currently identified as dividend payers, with an average dividend yield of around 4.34%. Several companies have already made payments, including CFAO Motors, Citabi, SOGB, NSIA Bank, BIIC, Ecobank Côte d'Ivoire, Sonatel, and several Bank of Africa subsidiaries. Other dividend dates are still ahead. SAPH, Total Côte d'Ivoire, Nestlé, Vivo Energy, and Servair are among the companies investors should keep on their radar. To access the full dividend calendar, including ex-dividend dates and payment dates, download the Daba app and view the complete schedule. Beyond the BRVM, several major stories shaped African markets this week. In Nigeria, annual inflation slowed to 15.43% in July from 15.91% in June. That could reopen the debate around further interest rate cuts by the Central Bank of Nigeria. But food inflation remains above 20%, which means policymakers may still need to be cautious. Dangote Petroleum Refinery is also moving closer to what could become one of Africa's largest IPOs. The company is targeting a potential listing in Nigeria that could raise as much as $5 billion and has secured a $1 billion underwriting program ahead of the planned offer. Dangote is also exploring another major refinery in Lamu, Kenya, designed to process around 700,000 barrels per day. Including associated infrastructure, total investment could approach $20 billion, and several East African governments are considering taking equity stakes. Private capital also remained active. 91 closed its third Africa Credit Opportunities Fund at $404 million, highlighting growing demand for private credit in Africa, particularly for companies and infrastructure projects that cannot get all the funding they need from traditional banks. AgDevCo Ventures reached a $49 million first, close to finance early-stage agriculture and food processing businesses in East Africa. Africa Finance Corporation raised 350 million Swiss francs, equivalent to roughly $431 million, through a 5-year digital bond. And Nigerian startup Terra Industries increased its total seed funding to $52 million as it expands manufacturing and technology operations across Africa and internationally. So, what should investors watch this week? The BRVM's momentum remains strong, but after such a rapid rise, stock selection becomes even more important. Some companies may still offer attractive upside relative to their estimated fair value, while others have already moved much closer to or beyond analyst target prices. The specific names, preferred entry levels, and recommendations are reserved for Daba Pro subscribers. With Daba Pro, you receive weekly recommendations, detailed stock analysis, exclusive market data, and reduced investing fees. The goal is not simply to watch the market rise, it is to understand where the next opportunities may be. And if you want to build a stronger foundation in stocks, bonds, dividends, and investing strategies, check out Daba Academy. There is currently a special promotion for podcast listeners. Use the code PODCAST when registering for Daba Academy and receive a 3,000 CFA franc discount. That was your weekly market recap with Markets Talk, the podcast from Daba Finance. I'm your markets editor, staying connected to the pulse of African markets. See you next time. Stay curious, stay invested.